All right, so the first bit of this, the first few slides worth, you should already know. Let's talk through it anyway. So we know that neurons are basic nerve cells. They're the cells that carry the electricity. They're in the nervous system. There are other cells that play more like a supportive role. They're called glial cells. The ones that we're concerned with for right now are the ones that carry the electricity. Those are the neurons. And we've seen pictures of them. We know kind of how they work. But let's pull up a picture. A lot of times we'll talk about three different types of neurons: motor, sensory, and interneurons. Motor neurons in general are connected to what? Muscle. And in general they're carrying information which way? To the muscle, away from the brain and spinal cord, which collectively we call the central nervous system. So they're carrying information away from the central nervous system. Those are motor neurons. Whereas sensory neurons are going the other way, right? They're picking up information, carrying it to either the spinal cord or the brain. The interneurons that we're going to be focused on are found where? Inter mean between. What are they between? What are they between? They are between a motor and a sensory neuron. They directly connect them together. Where? In the spinal cord, as part of what? No. Let's skip ahead to that, and we'll come back to some of this other stuff. All right. Here is a sensory nerve, picking up like a pinprick, carrying information to the spinal cord. In the spinal cord, you got an interneuron that's connecting directly to a motor neuron. And in this situation, this is going to tell that hand or whatever's getting a pinprick to do what? Get away from it. Pull back. This is what we call a reflex arc. It goes from sensory to interneuron to motor neuron to response. What's not involved at all? The brain. And this is all about being really, really right. Fast. Because your brain has to process things. You have to think about it. It's like a computer. It's got a processor speed.
So interneurons are between them.
Yes. They're between sensory and motor neurons in a reflex arc. So interneurons connect a sensory neuron to a motor neuron as part of a reflex arc. And that's to help you do something really fast for which you don't need your brain to be involved. It's about speed. Mostly safety issues.
Can you say like your knees?
Yeah, like when you kick your knee, same kind of deal. Let's back up a little bit though. You should know already, I hope, the parts of a neuron, but let's make sure. The main part of the neuron, I guess you could say, where the organelles and the nucleus are at, it's called the cell body. A lot of times we'll call it what else though? Soma. Branching out of that, almost like little tree branches, are dendrites. Dendra means like a tree. And the dendrite's job is to do what? Receive information, usually coming from other neurons. So in. So information is coming in this way. And it's going to eventually go out through this guy, which we're going to call the axon. Usually there's only one of those. It's carrying information out. And it's going to carry it out to what? The synapse, where it's going to be connected to a what or a what? A muscle, or maybe another what? Neuron. One of the two. It's either going to be connected to a muscle or to another neuron. Now remember that axon usually is insulated. It's got this fatty substance, this stuff made out of lipids, called the myelin sheath around it. Because remember, it's really like a wire. Its job is to conduct electricity. But notice that the myelin sheath looks like those little chains of hot dogs you see sometimes. But there's like little gaps, and that marks a little bit off. There are little gaps in the insulation where there's not any insulation. And those little gaps are called nodes, or nodes of Ranvier. I guess the guy who figured this out was French, probably. Nodes of Ranvier.
It's right there.
Yeah, it's up there. Node of Ranvier. Okay. We'll talk a little bit about what the importance of those nodes are. They turn out to be kind of important. But for right now, I wanted you to know the parts of a neuron. So you got dendrites, bringing in information. You got the soma, or the cell body, where the organelles in the nucleus are at. And then you got the axon, which carries outgoing information, either to a muscle or to another nerve. Nodes of Ranvier.
The things that they're in between.
The things that they're in between.
Myelin sheath.
Yeah, that's the myelin sheath. It's the insulation. It's made of fats, lipids. Now, we spent a lot of time talking about this next part when we were doing cell communication, cell signaling. This is an axon of what we're going to call the presynaptic neuron. So the axon is ending. This is the end of the axon. Inside the end of that axon are these little vesicles. What's inside those little vesicles? Neurotransmitters, signals, ligands. This is a dendrite on the next neuron. They're connected. But remember, they're not really physically connected. One doesn't actually touch the other. A synapse is really like a gap. And how does information get from pre to post synaptic neuron? Yeah. What will happen as the electrical signal travels through this presynaptic neuron? We might call that electrical signal an action potential. That's a word you need to leave here today knowing. An action potential is an electrical signal in a neuron. Action potential, electrical signal. When that action potential gets near the end of the axon, it causes channels, little ion channels, near the end of this axon to open. And what ion will flood into that neuron? Not this, in this case. Calcium. Calcium ions. And those calcium ions, there's so many and they flood in so fast that they essentially do what to those little vesicles filled with neurotransmitters? Push them out. Sometimes because of calcium's role here, it's called a second messenger. Because it's something to push out the message. Yeah, well, it's really might want to be thought of here as the first message would be the action potential. And then this would be like a second message. But that pushes out the little vesicles. The neurotransmitters are released into the synapse. And you can see them in this diagram. Diffusing across that synapse. And then on the postsynaptic neuron, these little blue things, what are they?
Receptors.
They're receptors. In particular, what kind of receptors?
Ion receptors.
Ligand-gated ion channels. Ligand-gated ion channels. Remember, a ligand is just a cell signal. Ligand-gated ion channels. And when the neurotransmitters, enough of them bind, there's the signal to the channel. What usually happens when something binds to a protein? Changes shape, right? A conformational change or induced fit. And in this case, the change is to open. The channel's open. And typically, what are those channels for? What ions? Sodium. And sodium begins to rush into this postsynaptic neuron. And that is the beginning of the action potential in that neuron. And that's what we're going to talk mostly about today, is what's an action potential and how does it work. But again, let's go back through it one more time. You got an electrical signal, an action potential going down the presynaptic neuron. It gets near the end. That voltage causes calcium channels to open. Calcium rushes in, pushes out neurotransmitters into the synapse. Those diffuse across the gaps, bind to little receptors, ligand-gated ion channel receptors, causing those to open. Say again?
Electrical signal poster.
It doesn't really go through, it gets restarted. Doesn't really. Some people think like sparks across. That's not what happens. The electrical signal causes the neurotransmitters to get released, which causes these channels to open, which then causes the nerve signal, the action potential, to start in the next neuron. So let's go to a diagram here of what an action potential sort of looks like. And before we really start talking too much about this diagram, let's think about the neuron. So this is a neuron. And the blue parts, the blue represents like the membrane of the neuron. We're looking at just a small piece of a neuron. When the neuron's not actually firing, there are a lot of potassiums in here, inside the neuron, and a lot of sodiums out here. Is that the way nature likes things?
No.
No. How does nature keep it that way?
Active transport.
Active transport using what? One of the most important proteins in your body. The sodium, potassium pump. And that pump is taking potassiums that may be outside the neuron and pumping them in. It's taking sodiums that are inside the neuron and pumping them out, keeping this concentration gradient. Sometimes when a nerve is in this condition, it's said to be polarized. That's an important word, polarized. Poles just mean what? Sides. It's got the sodium side and the potassium side. Inside is the potassium side, outside is the sodium side. This is what a nerve is like when it's ready to work. It's not doing anything right now, but it's ready. Think of it like a rubber band that's back. And I'm pointing it right at Adam's in between his eyes right now. But I'm holding it, I'm not firing. It's just ready. Okay, it's loaded. Okay? This is like a loaded neuron. It's ready to go, but it's not going anywhere right now. That's what polarized means. It's ready. All right, there's this stuff called, we'll just call it voltage for right now. The internal voltage of a neuron, even though there's some positive sodium or positive potassiums inside, there's also some negative things in there. The internal voltage of a resting neuron is said to be negative 70. What's that little m big V stand for? Millivolts, which means like 1,000th of a volt. Okay, AA battery.
So this is of a polarized neuron?
This is of a polarized neuron, one that's cocked and ready to shoot. Okay, AA battery, little big batteries. You might know what the voltage of those is?
No clue.
1.5 volts. So this is way less than even one of the little bitty 1.5 volt batteries. That's what a nerve is like when it's resting. It's not doing anything, it's just ready. So some stimulus comes along. Maybe this is a nerve in your ear, and it starts to rain outside. And you hear the rain beating on the roof. Your eardrum starts to vibrate. That causes the stimulus in nerves hooked up to your ear. As those nerves start getting stimulated, that causes channels in the neuron for sodium to open up. So the sodium channels open up. Well, if a channel for sodium was to open up, what's going to happen? It's going to go in, right? Because there's a big gradient. It starts going in. Sodium starts to go in. And since sodium's positive, what starts to happen to the voltage inside that neuron? It starts to go up. So it starts at negative 70, but as those sodium channels start to open, it starts to go up. If it's a big enough stimulus that enough sodium goes in to get you above negative 55, the voltage above negative 55, it's all or nothing from that point. It fires. It's going to go. Now, if the stimulus is really small and it's not enough to open up enough sodium channels, it just falls back down and starts over. Nothing happens. Negative 55 is called the threshold voltage. You got to get over that. If you get over that, it's all or nothing. It'll go. But once these sodium channels open, sodium starts rushing in, voltage starts going up. Now let's think of this. What did we call those little places on the axon without any insulation? Nodes of Rambier. Let's think of this as one of those nodes. When this voltage goes up enough, what do you think that does to the next node? The little sodium channels on that next node are voltage gated. So if the voltage here goes up enough, what does it cause to happen on the next node? It causes the sodium channels to open up. And then the sodium rushes in there. And if that voltage goes up enough, it causes the ones on the next channel to open up. Why does it have those gaps? Why not just go through the whole thing? It's about speed. Instead of going in a straight line, you're going bam, bam, bam. You're skipping, okay, from node to node. It's faster that way. It doesn't have to go all the way through the nerve. It's skipping from this part of the nerve to this part of the nerve to this part of the nerve to this part of the nerve. Makes it faster. Nerve signals, contrary to popular belief, do not travel at the speed of light. Right? Anywhere close to the speed of light. Fast, but not nearly the speed of light. So, again, sodium channels open, more sodium channels open, more sodium channels open, and as that's happening, what's happening to the voltage? It's going up, 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 up. Sodiums are moving. They're charged particles. What's the movement of any charged particles called? Electricity. This is electricity. That's why sodium and potassium are called what? Collectively. Sodium ions and potassium ions. They're electrolytes. That's why you need to drink Gatorade and stuff, right? Get your electrolytes. Eventually, the voltage starts to reach about positive 40 millivolts.
That's the limit.
That's sort of the upper limit. That depends on where the nerves are in your body, but on average, about positive 40 millivolts. Yep.
Okay, so if you drink electrolytes, how do they get from your stomach and into your nerves? Very carefully.
They're absorbed in your small intestine into your blood, and then transported from your blood to your nerves. That's pretty much the answer, yep. But once the voltage gets up to positive 40 millivolts, what do you think the signal to the sodium channels is? When the voltage in the neuron gets to about positive 40, that says sodium channels closed. So the sodium channels close up. But at the same time the sodium channels are closing, what does positive 40 tell to happen to the potassium channels? They open. So right up here, sodium channels close, potassium channels open. When the potassium channels open, what does potassium do? It leaves fast, so that this voltage starts dropping again. And it starts dropping really, really fast. Now notice it tends to drop a little bit below where it started. It starts a little bit below the negative 70. What do you think's going on in here? First of all, that period that's circled there is called the refractory period. What's a refractory period? It's the time when something won't work. So during that time frame, this nerve can't do anything.
So they won't work below 70. Below negative 70.
Well, it goes a little bit below negative 70, and in this period of time that I'm calling the refractory period, the nerve's got to get back to this polarized state. Because when this is falling, now there's more sodium inside than there is outside. And there's more potassium outside than there is inside. Is that the way the nerve wants to be? No, it wants the potassium where? On the inside and the sodium on the outside. So who really has to get to work during that circle period? What really has to do its job during that period? The sodium and potassium pump. It has to work hard. It has to pump potassiums back in, sodiums back out, and get back to that resting state, which we call what? What we call the nerve when it's resting and ready.
Polarized.
Polarized.
So is it only
Polarized.
Refractory.
Refractory.
So it's only polarized when it's at negative 70? Or it can
Well, it's polarized when the potassiums and the sodiums are separated from each other.
Okay.
There's steps like resting
Yeah, I'm going to get into all that in just a second. I'll go more details in a second. But for right now, when a nerve is resting and ready to fire, there's lots of potassiums on the inside of the neuron, lots of sodiums on the outside. When that's the case, the voltage, the voltage of the neuron should be about -70 millivolts. That's resting. Sometimes it's called resting potential. Potential is just another word for what? Yeah, but in terms of like physics or electricity, what's potential another name for?
It has energy.
Potential is another word for voltage. So if you hear, yep, if you hear talking about potential, that means voltage. So again, once a stimulus starts happening, that causes sodium channels to open. Sodium starts to rush in from high to low into the neuron, raising the voltage. The voltage goes up, 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 till it gets to about +40. That signals sodium channels to close and potassium channels to open. And when they open, potassium starts to rush out. That causes the voltage to go back down. Now it overshoots where it's supposed to. During that circled area there, the refractory period, the sodium-potassium pump is trying to get back to where things need to be. It's trying to get back to polarization. Pumping potassium's back into the neuron, sodium's back out. And notice this whole process that I just described actually happens in less than 5 milliseconds. So we're talking 0.005 seconds. That whole description, it took me 10 minutes to explain it. It actually happens in 0.005 seconds. Very quick process. Not speed a lot fast, but fast. Another way of talking about this diagram, we call that an action potential. But another thing we could use to call this diagram is we could use the word depolarization. Because what's happening to the separation of our sodiums and potassiums during that diagram? They're getting all mixed, right? So that's an action potential. Now I want to go back to this diagram of a neuron for a second. This one. And remember, we could think of our picture that we were just talking about as happening maybe here. And once that stimulus started going, the sodium channels in this node open. The voltage goes up. Eventually that causes the voltage inside the neuron to get high enough that it stimulates sodium channels here to open. And then that goes up high enough to stimulate the ones here to open. And then the ones here to open. And so on. That method of transmitting an electrical signal from node to node instead of going through the whole thing has a name. And it's called saltatory induction. So that's when the electrical signal, the action potential, instead of it going in a straight line through the axon, it jumps from node to node to node to node to node. And that makes it work much faster. There are some neurons in your body that aren't myelinated, and they work much more slowly than the ones that are myelinated work. It's about speed. Saltatory conduction is about moving that impulse from node to node to node to node really, really, really fast.
Which ones don't have myelin?
Certain parts of your brain that are more about like memory and stuff that don't need to happen really fast. And I can't tell you specifics. You have white matter and gray matter in your brain. The white matter part is myelinated, gray matter not. And I'll get more details of that later. One more thing. Actually, let's look at this first. Just kind of a summary of what I just talked about. So for an action potential, neurotransmitters from a presynaptic neuron bind to a ligand-gated ion channel on a postsynaptic neuron. And that opens up those sodium channels. Sodium starts to rush in. And if enough of it rushes in and the voltage there reaches higher than -55 millivolts, the action potential starts. The sodium channels are voltage gated. So when the voltage gets to a certain level, they open. And more of them open from node to node to node to node to node. Eventually, when the potential gets up to about positive 40, in some places it's positive 55, but positive 40 is good enough for you to know right now. Those sodium channels close, and the potassium channels open. And when the potassium channels open, since there's more potassium in the nerve than there is outside, potassium goes out. Voltage starts to drop. And once it gets down close to negative 70, what happens to the potassium channels? They close back up. And then what kicks into gear and starts working? Pump. Sodium potassium pump. And it pumps potassiums in, sodium's out, getting you back to polarization and ready to fire again. Like I said, all that happens in about 5 milliseconds from firing to ready to fire again. And that's an action potential. We'll talk more about it again next time, but I want to talk a little bit about it today. And another thing I want to briefly mention today is just a little bit about the nervous system, just in general. So we'll go from really tiny picture to big picture here for a second. Talk about the different divisions of your nervous system, and that's how we'll end today. The brain and the spinal cord, the main parts of your nervous system, comprise the central nervous system. It's the brain and the spinal cord. But branching off of that, you have lots and lots of nerves. The peripheral nervous system are the branches off of the central nervous system. You've got all kinds of nerves that are branching from there. What's peripheral mean? On the side, around. And that peripheral nervous system can be divided into lots of different parts. And we're going to talk about 2 main parts today and 2 subparts. One branch of the peripheral nervous system is called the autonomic nervous system. Autonomic sounds a lot like what? Automatic. This is a part of your nervous system that happens, that works unconsciously. You're not thinking about this. Well, that's not a reflex, but it's a part of your nervous system that is controlling things that you're not consciously thinking about it controlling.
Blinking.
Unconscious. Blinking, fight or flight response kinds of stuff. Like it says here, it helps to maintain things, perform without conscious control or conscious sensation. It can include things like your heart rate, your digestive processes. I mean, think about how frustrating it would be if you had to consciously, after you ate food, you had to tell your esophagus to push it to your stomach. And then you had to tell your stomach to churn. And then you had to tell your stomach to push the food in the small intestine. And then you had to tell the small intestine to do the wave to push the food to the large intestine. That would be frustrating. It would take a lot of brain power and concentration to do that. You don't have to do that because your autonomic nervous system controls it for you. It also controls your breathing rate, your respiration rate, when you make saliva, how much saliva you make, when you need to sweat, the diameter of your pupils. When it's really bright, you want to obviously make those smaller. When it's dark, you want to make them bigger. But you don't have to think about that. It happens on its own. It's involuntary. Now, we'll normally talk about 2 different branches of the autonomic nervous system. So these 2 are branches of that. Sympathetic and parasympathetic. And let's look at this. So this is your autonomic nervous system. And we want to think of the parasympathetic and the sympathetic nerves as being antagonistic toward each other. What does that mean? They're opposite. So if one nerve goes to your heart and it says speed up, you also got one going and saying what? Slow down. Parasympathetic and sympathetic.
And they don't shoot off at the same time.
Well, they might. Usually they're sort of balancing each other out. For example, over here on the right, these are nerves coming from the parasympathetic nervous system. Over here on the left, we have nerves coming from the sympathetic part of the nervous system. So for example, sympathetic nerves go to the heart and they tell it to speed up. Sympathetic nerves going to the air passages, like the bronchial passages, tell them to dilate. Sympathetic nerves go to your salivary glands and they tell them to stop salivating, or at least slow down. They go to your eye, dilate your pupils, inhibit tears. That sounds an awful lot like what? All those things together sound like what? Like the effects of adrenaline, right? Fight or flight response. On the other hand, your parasympathetic nerves tell the heart to slow. They tell the bronchioles and the air passages to constrict, get smaller. They stimulate salivation. They constrict the pupils. They stimulate tear production. So what I'm trying to tell you is that most of the time, as long as everything's going good, these two things are sort of balancing each other out. So you're somewhere in the middle. But if danger comes along, this system takes over. If complete relaxation takes over, you just ate dinner, you ate a huge dinner, you're in your recliner, you're kicked back, you're watching TV, then this system over here is taking over. Another thing that this diagram doesn't show you, let's look at this one. So the same idea, sympathetic on the left, parasympathetic on the right. Here we're looking at some different parts. Notice that the sympathetic nervous system is saying, okay, let's don't urinate right now. Let's decrease the movements of the small intestine. Let's decrease the activity of the kidneys, the stomach, the pancreas. Let's stimulate the liver to release glucose. But over here on the parasympathetic side, it's saying, okay, we need to urinate. We need the intestines to move around more. We need the stomach to go to work. We need the pancreas to go to work. We need the gallbladder to go to work. When you're relaxed, what happens to the blood flow when you're really, really relaxed? Where does a lot of the blood go when you're really, really relaxed? A lot of the blood goes to your digestive organs when you're really kicked back and you start digesting your food. But if you're really stressed out and you're in danger, what happens to blood flow to those organs? Slows down. Blood vessels going there constrict. It just really slows down. And most of the blood goes to where when you're going fight or flight? Your muscles, your brain, places like that. Okay? And that's what we're seeing here. That if we're not in a fight or flight response, the parasympathetic might take over and say, okay, let's digest our food. Let's speed up digestive activity. But if we are in a fight or flight, the sympathetic nervous system is saying, hey, that can wait. Let's slow those processes down. Let's send that blood to somewhere else. We can digest food later, because if we don't shunt our blood and attention away from the digestive system, we don't have to worry about digestion because we're going to be dead. So let's put that on hold. So sympathetic is saying digestive processes go on hold. Parasympathetic is saying, hey, everything's good, life is good. Let's kick back, let's relax. All right, so let's end with this for today. So far, we talked about the central nervous system, brain and the spinal cord, and things that branch off of that are called the peripheral nervous system. The peripheral nervous system has one branch called the autonomic, which then has two branches. So what were those two branches? Sympathetic and parasympathetic. And one branch that we didn't get to today, but I'll mention so my diagram is complete. There's another branch of the peripheral nervous system here called the somatic. Which means what? Body. This is the conscious part. So this is when you consciously feel, you consciously move. So you got the unconscious part, the autonomic, and you got the conscious part of your peripheral nervous system. And that's where we will stop for today. Did everybody get on the list? Sign up list?
Hey, can you check, make sure that I'm
I'm fairly certain you are.